Continuing Likutei Halachos Hashkamas HaBoker Gimel, Reb Nosson has been speaking about the two halves of the night. And the first half of the night where the avodah is to sleep, and the second half of the night, at least ideally, is tikkun chatzos, where a person rises and a person is reflecting on the churban in a wakeful state. And like we learned in the previous recording, the first half of the night deals with the questions that are completely beyond us, and there's no way that we can even give any kind of rationalization or answer or justification as to why these things happened in the world. Such darkness, such painful moments, such challenges, that the only response needs to be total bittul, absolute emunah, where a person sort of goes into a place of sleep, where they sink, so to speak, below their level of ordinary consciousness, where they shut off their thinking, and they remember that we're just limited creatures. And while we don't necessarily have the rationale for everything, that itself is rational, because we're just humans, right? And we can reflect on the fact that there are realms by which we are fundamentally limited, where there are things that are happening that are totally, essentially beyond us. And we know our limitations. And so when we go into that state of sleep, really in this context, we're not just sinking below our consciousness, but we're rising above our consciousness. We're opening ourselves up to realizing that Rabbas Machshavas B'Lev Ish, we might have all of our considerations, but Ba'atzas Hashem Yisakum, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a different plan. Lo machshavosai machshavos seichem. Hashem says, my thoughts are not your thoughts. And that's the first half of the night. The second half of the night addresses those questions that do have answers, those questions where we are able to say something definitive in response to help ourselves hold tight to emunah. That's the aspect of waking up. That's the aspect of tikkun chatzos. And Reb Nosson says, with this understanding of the tikkun of sleep and what that experience is and what that really means when a person drifts off to sleep and then they wake up, whenever they wake up, whether it's chatzos or, like Reb Nosson says in this paragraph, whether a person wakes up just before the light of day, and a person pushes themselves to go to sleep early, to wake up early, because that's so crucially important to Avodas Hashem, where a person's in it for real. It isn't just about, you make shachris at some point. It means a person pushes themselves to wake up early. And if you're pushing yourself to wake up early, so then you're also pushing yourself to go to sleep early, and effectively your whole day is structured around real avodah, where you're going the extra mile. That's true Avodas Hashem. So Reb Nosson says when a person wakes up, that's why the Shulchan Aruch, right in the beginning, refers to waking up like a lion, like we learned about last time. A person wakes up as Skabakari, and then the Shulchan Aruch has right there in Siman Aleph, Sif Aleph, the word Shivisi Hashem L'nagdi Samid, where the Ramah is telling us that a person needs to constantly live as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mamish right in front of them, and they live with that awareness, because a person doesn't act in the throne room of a king the way that a person would act in his home in some village far away. It's a royal setting. A person has to recognize the whole cosmos, the whole existence is the throne room of the king. And we should feel overwhelmed by the very real presence of Hashem in everything. And to the degree that a person lives that way, so their whole life is different. So what's the connection between waking up and living with the realization of Shivisi Hashem L'nagdi Samid? Why is that right there in the beginning of Shulchan Aruch? Says Reb Nosson, because this is exactly the symbol or the spiritual code that becomes this experience of sleeping and then waking up. What does a person wake up to when a person wakes up at that beginning of the second half of the night for tikkun chatzos, or a person wakes up while it's still dark in the morning? That means that we're coming to the realization of Shivisi Hashem L'nagdi Samid. A person comes to that realization, that awakening, and we call it an awakening, right? Like wakefulness, like waking up. A person has this awakening that really Hashem is running my life, and that everything that happens, I'm able to say to myself, there are reasons why things happen. And maybe there are reasons that we can even figure out ourselves. We can say it was a kapara for our averos, or Hashem is trying to tell me something, to communicate something, or this is something that actually right now it looks like it's bad, but in the future it's going to be revealed and recontextualized retroactively, or retrospectively, that this will be seen as something that was very good. Whatever it is that we're able to say. But it all falls within that general awareness of the fact that Shivisi Hashem L'nagdi Samid, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is real, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is really part of our lives, running our lives, not just part of our lives. Our lives are part of Him, Kivyachol, and the unfolding of godliness in the world. The whole earth is shining. The whole earth is shining with God's presence. When a person recognizes that, that is the experience of wakefulness. And that's why, again, the Shulchan Aruch referring to waking up, right away teaches us about waking up to the presence of the divine. And in so doing, this is how we rectify the darkness of night, by waking up to emunah. And that's that avodah. And the Reb Nosson says that this really is why right after we go from that experience into tefillah. Because Reb Nachman says elsewhere in the Kutumran, Tarakuf Nun Hey, that part of the reason why people struggle so much with davening is because of a lack of emunah. If people really had emunah, that Hashem actually believes in us enough and cares about us enough, that Hashem is listening to every word of tefillah that comes out of our mouth. Hashem is there, and Hashem is attentive, and Hashem cares, and Hashem is listening, and we believed in Him, and we believed in us, and we believed in ourselves because we believed in Him, and we believed in Him because we still believed in ourselves. A person who has that dual emunah is going to daven appropriately, properly. And a person's going to daven with kavanah. Says Rabbi Nachman, but a person who doesn't have that emunah, so they might come to shul still, they're card-carrying members of the community, so they'll still come to shul and they'll take the box and they'll carry on and they'll say the words, but there's something missing. And they're not going to daven with kavanah, because what's the point? They've given up on themselves. They don't believe that Hashem cares about them anymore. So right after a person wakes up from this darkness into the consciousness of Shivisi Hashem L'Nagdi Samid, says Reb Nosson, you got to quickly run and daven, because now your davening is going to be a tefillah that's founded on emunah. Now your davening is going to be a davening that can be expressed with tremendous faith and tremendous kavana and a wholeheartedness that's there specifically because we have awoken into this realization and remembrance of this, that even though we go through darkness in life, it's not happening to us, it's happening for us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running the show, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us and He cares for us. Going back to the first piece of Likutei Halachos, we have a Likutei Tova that's shining, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu believes in, and Hashem is nurturing, and despite everything that's going on in our lives, Hashem is there. And when we have this awareness and we're conscious of this in the morning when we wake up, so then we're going to be able to daven properly with all of our heart and soul. And Reb Nosson says this is perhaps the deeper meaning of what Arizal says, that Tikkun Chatzos is in some way a hachana, a preparation for tefillah. And this is the way that we're able to understand that, because Tikkun Chatzos is all about emunah, Shivisi Hashem L'Nagdi Samid. That's right in the beginning of Shulchan Aruch, relating to waking up, when a person has this awakening. And then that's a hachana to be able to daven properly, because davening properly can only be done with emunah.
Ani habe vi'ata ha'av sheli shekol kach ohev oti ha'av sheli melech chai v'kayah al kol neshima she'ani